She never chased the spotlight, never begged the crowd to stay. She was the hush after the applause, the grace behind the grit. For years, Jessi Colter was known as the angel by the fire-soft gospel soul, tethered to the wild storm of Waylon Jennings. She stood by him through the tours, the turmoil, the tornado that was outlaw country. But now at 82, Jessi isn't just turning a page. She's flipping the whole book in a moment no one saw coming. She leaned in and whispered just 6 words. He left something under the floorboards. No lead-in, no backstory. Just a quiet detonator of a sentence that froze her family mid-breath and sent music historians scrambling, because whatever Waylon hid, tangible or not, Jessi buried it deeper than anyone ever knew. Through decades of chaos, of silence, of secrets. Now, she's done holding it in. What comes next isn't a tribute. It's not a memoir. It's a revelation, a soul-rattling truth that could burn holes through the legend of Waylon Jennings himself. Before the final note plays, we'll find a box, a letter scorched at the edges, a missing song, and the secret Jessi swore she'd never tell, because legends aren't always written in rhyme. Sometimes they're hidden in whispers. And now, after 40 years, the whisper is breaking into thunder. Before she was the woman in Waylon Jennings' shadow, she was Miriam Johnson, a preacher's daughter from the Arizona desert, raised on faith, scorched earth, and hymns that hung heavy in the chapel air. Her voice, velvet wrapped around thunder. She didn't come from fame. She came from fire, from gospel chords and Sunday sermons, from a piano that spoke for her before she ever dared to. But even as a girl, Miriam didn't just want to sing. She wanted to shake people, to break hearts wide open, to turn confession into performance. Then came Dwayne Eddy. Yes, that Dwayne. Eddy, the twang king, the rockabilly god, young love, fast tours, front row lessons in a backstage world. But the stage lights dimmed, the marriage cracked, and when she left, she didn't just leave a husband. She left the version of herself that was built for someone else's story. What rose from the ashes was no longer Miriam. She was Jessi Colter now. Her debut album didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. I'm Jessi Colter was more than a record. It was a resurrection. A woman stepping into her power, spine straight, voice unshakable. But just as she carved her place, the wind shifted. Waylon Jennings walked in, and with him came a love so wild, so consuming, it didn't just rewrite her story, it hijacked it. What happened next changed everything. Waylon Jennings didn't walk into a room. He detonated it. Swagger wrapped in black leather, voice like smoke, soul stitched together with guitar strings and bad decisions. He was part outlaw, part heartbreak, all hurricane. And when he met Jessi Colter, the air itself changed. This wasn't chemistry. This was combustion. A spark so volatile, it didn't just light fires, it burned blueprints, rewrote lives. The world saw a legend in the making. But Jessi saw what no one else bothered to look for. Not the icon, not the rebel. She saw the boy buried beneath the tattoos and tequila. The dreamer too soft for the world he kept trying to conquer. The man drowning quietly in the very storm he created. And she believed naively, maybe that love could be a lifeline. But this wasn't a love story. It was a war. They didn't date. They collided. Highs that felt like heaven. Lows that scraped hell's basement. Whispers. Vanishing acts. Hotel keys and hangovers. Waylon would disappear sometimes for nights. Sometimes for weeks. And Jessi would wait, not knowing if he was drunk or dead. But she stayed, not out of fear, out of hope, out of the belief that maybe, just maybe, if she loved him hard enough, he'd finally come home to himself. Then came 1975. I'm Not Lisa hit the airwaves, a ghost of a song. A woman mistaken for someone she'd never be. It soared. And so, did Jess's name? But even at her peak, they still introduced her as his wife, his muse, his mystery, his shadow. And behind the spotlight, the bruises weren't just emotional anymore. But that's not where the story ends, because beneath the wreckage was something no one ever expected, something Jessi kept buried until now. It started with whispers, nothing loud, nothing obvious, just glances exchanged in quiet corners, a hand that lingered too long on her arm, a pause too heavy after a joke that didn't land. People noticed the way Jessi flinched when Waylon's voice sharpened, the way she smoothed it over with a smile and a softer excuse. He's just tired. He's under pressure. He's got a lot on his plate. But behind her practiced calm, something was fraying. She swore there was never harm behind those doors. Never a hand raised. Never a line crossed. And maybe that was true. But pain doesn't always leave bruises where the eye can see. Then came the night in Houston. After the show, something changed. Jessi wouldn't talk about it for decades. Not to friends. Not to family. But she wrote it down, scrawled in a journal she never meant to share, in handwriting that shook like her hands did that night. He looked through me like I wasn't real, like he didn't recognize me at all. She never said what happened after that, only that it was the moment she stopped feeling safe. The moment something inside her went still. And whatever happened, she buried it so deep it almost vanished, almost, because years later, when the silence could no longer hold, she pointed back to that night, to that look, to the part of herself she sealed away and swore never to open. That was the beginning of it, the secret, the thing Waylon left behind, still waiting under the floorboards. But the story doesn't end with one secret, because once the unraveling begins, it doesn't stop. A rundown motel outside Memphis, no cameras, no handlers, no glamour, just flickering neon-stained curtains, and a silence so loud it pressed against the walls. Jessi was worn thin, pleading with Waylon to slow down, to eat, to sleep, to stop, running from the fog that was creeping into every corner of his mind. But he didn't slow down. He snapped not with fists, with words, sharp, precise, designed to cut. She'd later say they didn't even sound like him, didn't feel human. Only this: it was like watching the devil speak through the lips of someone I once loved. She left that night, barefoot, breathless, no purse, no plan, just the ache in her chest and the highway stretching endlessly in front of her. When she came back the next morning, he was gone. No note, no apology, no sign of where he'd gone or when he might return. Just a shattered motel mirror and a small wooden box on the nightstand. She didn't open it, not that day, not that year, not for 30 years, because something about it felt wrong, too intentional, too final. It wasn't a keepsake. It was a message, a warning, maybe even a confession. And when she finally opened it decades later, what she found didn't just rewrite her memories. It shattered them. But that box? That wasn't the end out. It was just the first crack in the facade. Because Waylon wasn't just disappearing from hotel rooms anymore. He was disappearing from reality. Waylon's addiction didn't whisper. It roared. It wasn't a bad habit. It was a second shadow, always there, always hungry. The pills, the blow, the endless nights that bled into days. They didn't just numb the pain. They rewired him. Jessi would wake at 4 a.m. to find him pacing the hallway, bloodshot eyes, muttering to people who weren't there. Sometimes it was black vans parked outside. Other times, hidden microphones. Agents in the audience, he'd whisper. Voices in the mixboard. To the fans, he was still the outlaw king, snarling into microphones, commanding stages like a war god in cowboy boots. But behind the scenes, he was slipping, and Jessi was the last one holding the thread. She wasn't just loving him, she was managing him, covering for him, protecting the myth. While the man vanished behind it, collapsed backstage. Exhaustion, they'd say. Missed shows? Bad weather. But Jessi knew the truth. She had the proof. A private notebook tucked away, pages filled with addresses, alias names, lies he told his own band, maps of where he ran when he didn't want to be found. It wasn't a journal. It was a survival manual, written by a woman trying to love someone she couldn't reach anymore. And then came the E-trips, the overdoses no one ever spoke of, the nights he looked into her eyes and saw a stranger. One entry scrawled in Jessi's hand still burns. At night, he'd call me darlin', like I was just another fan he couldn't remember meeting. Her heart didn't just break. It was being erased, one hallucination at a time. And still, she stayed, but each step deeper into his darkness cost her a piece of herself, until one night, a piano arrived, and everything changed. Without being announced, a baby grand piano was delivered to their home with just one line carved into the underside of the lid, to the one who stayed. Jessi never figured out who sent it. Waylon never acknowledged it. But something about that piano felt deliberate, like someone, maybe even Waylon himself, was trying to reach her the only way she still understood. She began to play again, quietly, at night, when the rest of the house was still and her thoughts were loud old gospel, hymns, lullabies, pieces of herself she hadn't touched in years. And slowly, almost cruelly, the memories began to stir. There was one in particular, one she had buried, so deep it had nearly fossilized. A night in Tucson, a letter Waylon made her burn. A secret, he said, would ruin them both if it ever got out. She thought she'd let it go, thought she'd moved on, but the melody remembered. And with each chord, the truth began humming back beneath her fingertips, a truth that would explain the letter, the wooden box, and why Jessi Colter still, even in her 80s, can't sleep with the lights off. But even as the memories came flooding back, something else was rising to the surface, something she and Waylon had both spent decades pretending didn't exist. One night, he finally said the words she never expected to hear. It arrived without warning, a baby grand piano delivered to the house like a ghost with keys. No card, no return address. Just one line carved into the underside of the lid, to the one who stayed. Jessi never found out who sent it. Waylon never mentioned it, but it didn't feel random. It felt like a message, like someone, maybe even Waylon himself, was trying to speak in the only language she still trusted. So she played, not loudly, not for anyone, but in the hush of night, when the house was silent and her thoughts weren't. She played the hymns she grew up on, the lullabies she used to hum to herself in motel bathrooms, fragments of a woman she'd long forgotten how to be. And with every note, the past began to stir, memories she'd locked away like old recordings in a dusty attic, some sweet, some sharp, but one in particular refused to stay buried. A night in Tucson, a letter Waylon forced her to burn. A secret, he said, would ruin them both if it ever came to light. She thought it was gone, turned to ash. But the music remembered, and as her fingers moved, so did the memory. Slow, relentless, unforgiving, the chords began to echo things she didn't want to hear, things that connected the letter to the wooden box, to the reason Jessi, even now, in her 80s, still can't sleep with the lights off. But it wasn't just memory rising, it was something else. Something she and Waylon had both buried so deep they started to believe it never existed, until one night he said the words she never thought she'd hear, words that made her stop playing mid-note, mid-breath, words that changed everything. The tape wasn't music. It wasn't a demo. It was something far more unsettling. Waylon's voice, raw and uneven, drifted through the speakers, confessing, rambling, crying. He spoke of a choice he made in 1974, a choice that, in his own words, buried more than just a name. Jessi listened once, hands trembling. Then she tucked the cassette away in a safety deposit box, along with the wooden box from the motel and a photograph she had no memory of ever taking in it. Waylon stood outside a small desert church. Beside him, a man Jessi didn't recognize. On the back, a name was scribbled in faded ink. "Don't forget what we did." The weight of it was unbearable. So Jessi did what she always did. She kept it to herself. But the past doesn't stay buried. A year after Waylon's death, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of the photo. Only this version showed something new in the blurred background. Was Jessi standing just outside the church doors, watching below the image? A single typed line. "The truth doesn't stay dead forever." She didn't tell her son. She didn't call the police. Instead, she vanished. For 3 days, Jessi disappeared without a word, and when she returned, she burned everything. Decades of journals, her life, her secrets went up in flames in the backyard fire pit. Neighbors said she stood there for hours, watching the smoke rise. After that, something shifted in her. She spoke less, sang softer, and when she did talk, it was in riddles, parables about forgiveness, mercy, and silence that costs more than truth. But even then, one question still echoed louder than the rest. What had happened in Tucson, and what exactly was buried there? Because the whispers were growing louder, and somewhere in those ashes was a song the world was never supposed to hear. They called it the fifth verse, a track that was never released, never played live, never listed in RCA's official archives. But according to old session musicians and crew members from Waylon's outlaw years, it existed, a song recorded late, one night in 1989. Just Waylon, a guitar, and the weight of everything he'd never said out loud. Only a handful of people ever claimed to have heard it. One of them, a retired sound engineer, described it as a confession wrapped in twang and torment. He said the lyrics mentioned a preacher's lie, a grave with no name, and a woman who knew too much. That woman was Jessi. Rumors swirled. For years, Reddit threads dissected old interviews. Conspiracy videos tried syncing obscure Waylon lyrics with grainy footage. Then, in 2010, something strange happened. An anonymous blog posted a 20-second audio clip. It was Waylon's voice, haunted, tired, humming a melody no one recognized. The post vanished within hours, deleted, scrubbed, but not before fans caught wind. The legend of the fifth verse exploded. And Jessi? She said nothing until 2012, a rare Q&A in Texas. A young fan stood and asked, "Did Waylon ever record a song about Tucson?" The room fell silent. Jessi looked down, folded her hands, and after a long pause, said softly, "He recorded many things he never wanted the world to hear." She didn't elaborate, but it was enough. Interest reignited. Reporters came knocking. Producers combed through storage units, but the tape remained lost. And that's when Jessi made a move no one expected. She contacted a Nashville historian known for uncovering lost outlaw recordings. She handed him a sealed envelope and said, "Release this after I'm gone." Inside was a letter, a story, and a USB drive. When asked what was on it, the historian simply replied, "It's not a love story. It's a warning." Whatever truth Waylon confessed in that song, Jessi made sure it wouldn't stay buried forever. It didn't come with a press release, no media rollout, no label backing, no fanfare, just a quiet upload to a nearly forgotten streaming site under a name the industry had long stopped watching. Miriam Johnson, Jessi's birth name. The album was called Floorboards. No cover art, no track descriptions. Just 10 raw acoustic songs stripped down, unfiltered, and aching with something heavier than nostalgia. But it was track 7 that stopped listeners cold. A song titled simply Tucson. No one had heard it before, and once they did, they knew why. Jess's voice, older now, frayed at the edges, didn't sing about love or heartbreak. She sang about secrecy, about weight, about something done under desert skies that couldn't be undone. One line, in particular, sent chills through the community. He said the bottle was empty, but the deed was done. So we buried the truth before the morning sun. It wasn't vague. It wasn't poetic for the sake of drama. It was a map. Within days, the album was pulled offline. Vanished, server scrubbed. No explanation. No archive, only a handful of listeners had downloaded it before it disappeared. But that was all it took, because now the myth had cracked wide open, and someone somewhere was watching the fallout. Not long after the Floorboards album vanished, something strange happened in the Arizona desert. A small church just outside Tucson, a forgotten spot locals barely remembered, suddenly closed for renovations. According to county records, the basement was excavated due to foundation instability. But no one could explain why federal vehicles were seen parked nearby. No news crews were allowed on site. No permits for historical preservation were filed. Just a brief entry in a public log. Subterranean inspection, classified personnel present. Locals whispered. Fans speculated. Was this the church from the photo? The one where Waylon stood beside the stranger? The one Jessi had once been seen in the blurry background of? No one confirmed it, and Jessi? She didn't say a word, but then came the final interview. Sitting on her front porch, sunlight flickering through tall oaks, she was asked the question that had been following her for decades. Do you have any regrets? She paused for a long time. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, said, I wish we'd been more honest with each other, with ourselves. But Waylon, he was a haunted man, and some ghosts. She looked away. You can't bury with songs. That was all she said. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to, because by then it was clear. Jessi Colter had carried the burden of truth longer than anyone should have to. And whether it was buried under church floors or in the space between lyrics, she had finally let it out. But one final question remained. What did she leave behind for us to find? Jessi Colter didn't reveal the truth with a tell-all memoir. She didn't break her silence with headlines or interviews. She let it bleed through melodies, through journal scraps, whispered lyrics, and a piano that never forgot what her heart tried to bury. And in the end, when she released that quiet acoustic album, she wasn't just singing about loss. She was giving us the final piece of a story too, heavy for one woman to carry alone. Because this was never just about Waylon Jennings. It was about what they hid, what they promised never to speak of. What? They left behind. A tape labeled Tombstone, a burned letter, a church with a sealed basement, and a woman who stayed silent for decades because she believed some truths could only be judged by God. But now, the silence is breaking. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think Jessi's final songs were a confession? Was Floorboards her way of setting the record straight, or was it a warning, just like she said? And what really happened that night in Tucson? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every theory, every clue, every new piece of the puzzle. And if you want more stories like this, tales of love, mystery, music, and secrets buried deeper than lyrics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a chapter. Because some songs are more than just music. Some are messages, and some are still waiting to be heard.